In Chapter 3 of Lyme, the first epidemic of climate change, what did you mean by an ancient bug revives?
The pathogen that causes Lyme disease is called Borrelia Burgdorferi. It is a corkscrew-shaped spirochete. It has amazing abilities to drill through tough joint cartilage in our bodies to, as I said, get into our organs, get into our brains. And while I say in my book that Lyme disease is the first epidemic of climate change didn't invent Lyme disease. It's been around in the environment for millions of years. And perhaps the first evidence that we have of it is in a piece of amber, which is basically fossilized resin from an ancient tree. And this resin caught in it a tick, a perfectly preserved 8-legged tick that looks a lot like the ticks we have today. And a very fortunate scientist from the University of Oregon brought this hunk of amber back to the United States, sliced it up, found this tick, and then put the tick under an electron microscope. Well, what did he see inside the belly of that tick but coiled bacteria that are considered to be the first evidence of Lyme disease? So this is 15 to 20 million years ago. These two organisms were coexisting. And that, by the way, gives them an incredibly great advantage over us. We are new on the menu to this organism. We don't have the adaptations that take eons to develop to fight it off. But ticks and Lyme disease have really learned to coexist very well. I say in my book that a tick that is infected is actually healthier than a tick that isn't infected with the Lyme disease pathogen. It can quest further for food. It can climb higher up a stalk of grass and wait there for an unwitting mammal to pass by and grab onto. It has more body fat. How you measure body fat in a tick is quite a feat, but it did that. It has more body fat. It also lives longer, and it's more able to reproduce. So great advantages to being infected as a tick with the Lyme disease pathogen, which tells us something. It's been around a long time. Probably the first evidence of infection by Lyme disease is in a 5,500-year-old corpse that was found in a melting glacier, another outgrowth of climate change, in the Italian Alps. This body was found about 20 years ago. We call this hunter-gatherer today Otzi, O-T-Z-I. And many, many studies have been done of Otzi to figure out how people lived 5,000 years ago. And among them was testing what was in his body tissue. Well, lo and behold, the DNA for Borrelia Burgdorferi was found in Otzi. And oh, by the way, Otzi was carrying a satchel of a fungus, a mushroom, that is known to have antimicrobial properties. So our forebears way long ago were trying to figure out how to manage this infection.
In Chapter 5 of your book, Lyme, the first epidemic of climate change, what did you mean by little armored tanks?
Little armored tanks is the name that a scientist has given to ticks. The scientist, Felicia Keesing is her name. She works at Bard University, does terrific research, has studied ticks extensively and their amazing abilities to survive very, very cold, harsh environments, to basically hide under the leaf litter and just hang out there in sub-zero temperature for long periods of time. So she basically has read the research. She has come up with this name, little armored tanks. And if you ever pick up a tick, if you ever find one on your body, I hope you don't, and you try and squish it, it is very difficult to kill. It's not like a mosquito where you give it a little swat and it's gone. These things have plates on top and bottom of their bodies that basically makes them inure to any kind of pressure like that. Ticks are champion survivors. There have been studies done in which they found that a tick survived something on the order of 500 days without eating. Ticks have basically 3 life stages, the kinds of ticks that we're concerned with, mainly black-legged ticks, which cause Lyme disease. There's also the Lone Star tick, which gives us, if we're bitten and unlucky, things like Rocky Mountain spotted fever. But in one case, as I said, a tick was able to survive that long without eating. And it's probably not all that surprising because a tick only eats 3 times in its entire life. It lives maybe 2 years, and it takes a blood meal for each life stage. As a larva, after it hatches, along with its 200 or 2,000 or 3,000 brothers and sisters, as a nymph, then molts into a nymph, the 2nd stage, it then molts into an adult, its 3rd stage. It takes 3 blood meals. And in its first blood meal, it may, and often does, pick up pathogens from the small mammals that it feeds upon. That's how ticks generally are infected. They generally aren't born infected with Lyme disease, though there is one kind of Borrelia called Borrelia miyamotoi that can be transovarially passed, in other words, from the mother to the egg. But a tick will feed on a small mammal, usually a mouse. It will become infected 90% of the time in many places where there are Lyme disease. It will fall off, it'll nice and engorged. It'll hide in that leaf litter for some period of time. It'll molt, and then it'll come out to be a nymph. The 2nd stage of the life of a tick is most dangerous to human beings, because in that stage, this little armored tank also is quite invisible. We really can't see the nymph tick. It's about the size of a speck of pepper, maybe a poppy seed. It's something that's very easily missed on your body or on your clothing. And that's why it's so dangerous, because it'll climb up your sock, maybe under your trouser legs. I suggest putting your socks over your pants when you're walking out in a field. And it'll settle in, it'll find a nice moist spot, maybe the back of the knee, maybe the underarm, maybe the hairline, and it'll do its dirty work. And it'll fall off. And after staying on you maybe a couple of days and taking its blood meal, you may or may not get that Lyme disease rash. And if you do, and you're lucky enough to see it, you're among the fortunate population who get this disease because you can be treated early. Many people, because the nymph tick is so very tiny, because it may leave a rash on you in a place where you don't see it, because it also sometimes doesn't leave a rash, these symptoms of Lyme disease are missed and the infection progresses. But these little armored tanks are something to be taken seriously.